Chapter 21. Unknown. The fox was more than just a fox, if indeed it was a fox at all. At first, Osmond thought the strange flickering of its coloration was the play of the light and shadow through the trees across its scarlet and gold fur. He had even convinced himself it was just a visual illusion by comparing it to Yanri's amber hair, which also seemed alight with an inner fire. But the longer he watched, even when the fox was still, which was not often, her coat shimmered like heat above a bed of coals. That was not the only thing about the fox, though. Osmond could have his eyes locked on the fox walking on the trail just a few feet in front of him and catch a glint of light out of the corner of his eye hundreds of feet ahead. As soon as his eyes would dart instinctively to the flash, the fox would be where his eyes landed, grinning at Osmond and no longer on the path directly ahead of him. It was as though cause and effect had no power over the creature, and the rules of the physical world were just a game it could choose to play, or not. Osmond knew full well that the fox understood the frustration it was causing him. What began as a taunting, try-to-catch-me-in-the-act amusement for the first hour of their hike turned into the fox blatantly defying all logic with its antics during the next hour. It would flash from walking on the trail to strolling up the side of a tree as though gravity was pulling at right angles to its usual direction, to being in two places at once, both sitting on Anson's shoulder and curled on top of Yanri's head like a hat simultaneously. Yanri, of course, found it hilarious, narrating every impossible thing she did.
Oh, now she's sitting on the bottom of the tree limb, grooming herself. She's off again. Oh, nope, there she is. Would you look at that? Her tail is on one side of the trail and her head is on the other. Anson, I think she's in your jerky again. She is a clever one.
Their line came to a halt once again as Anson fished the frisky fox out of his pack for the third time. He playfully booped the fox on the nose, saying, "You are going to give yourself a tummy ache, little one," playfully chiding it. Osmond didn't want to waste any of the vitality they consumed from their hunt to soul-channel himself into the Saldrig, but, tired of the fox's antics and delays, blurted out, "Maybe I should just turn into the judge to guide us." Before he uttered the first word, the fox was on Osmond's shoulder, sitting with a rigid back and moving its mouth, mocking his words. Osmond turned his head to the fox, ready to scold it, but stopped when she placed her forehead on his and looked deep into his eyes. Reflected in her pupils was the image of his father. She disengaged her stare and looked up the trail, giving a slight nod. "You've seen my father? Up ahead? That's where you're taking us?" Osmond asked. In answer, the fox leaped off his shoulder and began walking up the trail as any creature of the physical world would. Yanri came up on one side of Osmond and Anson on the other, each laying a hand on his shoulder. Anson was the one to speak. "Well, let's see what she wants to show us." Osmond led the way with the two close behind. Their destination wasn't far. Oddly, it was literally around the next bend in the trail, even though there was no indication that something lay ahead until suddenly, there it was. They entered a large open glade that posed many more questions than the one it answered. At its center was an ironwood tree. Although it was nearly 40 feet tall with a trunk wider than Osmond could reach, it was evident that it was newly sprouted, its massive seed hole still visible, half buried in the soil at its base. It wasn't just any ironwood tree. It was Arbor Luminari. Understanding hit Osmond like a wave. This forest wasn't somewhere else. It was somewhen else. Their whole journey once through the portal had been within the footprint of the World Tree as it existed in their time, but at the time when it was first born. "I see my friend found you," said a gravelly voice, as Tavi stepped into view from the far side of the World Tree. Tavi looked the same as Osmond's last memory of his father. He was haggard, gaunt, and broken, with robes unkempt and leaning heavily on a gnarled walking stick. Yellow-orange motes of light flickered across him occasionally, like the sparks kicked up from a fire when poked with a stick. The rippling illumination was familiar to Osmond. "You aren't him," Osmond observed. "You're a Willico, aren't you?" "A bit more sentient than a Willico and more intentional, but that is a close enough assessment of what I am." the echo of Tavi replied. Yanri whispered in Osmond's ear.
Like Wilfred, right?
Osmond gave a slight nod, then continued addressing Tavi. Why are you here? Your father left me here, of course, Tavi replied, with the same grating tone of superiority that so annoyed Osmond in life. I am here to help you complete what I could not. How can I possibly do something that the great Architavia Thorandus could not? Osmond asked, stating Tavi's formal name mockingly. Osmond now knew so much more about his father and himself, but seeing this echo of him and speaking to him slammed him right back into all his old feelings about his father. Because you were always meant to achieve far more extraordinary things in your life than I ever did in mine. Tavi's confession was heartfelt and sincere, deflating Osmond's hostility somewhat. Tavi continued. I failed. Spectacularly so. In more ways than I can count. But most tragically, I failed you. Tavi sighed. In trying to make my own journey and then your journey easier, I laid you upon the worst possible path to achieve what fate required. The echo of Tavi crossed to Osmond, hand outstretched as though to lay it on his chest, but Osmond stepped back, not allowing Tavi to touch him. The echo spoke sincerely to Osmond. I knew you couldn't stay on the Isles, but I never intended or wanted you to harm yourself. Yanri stepped between Osmond and Tavi.
That is all well and good, but I saw what you did to him. I felt what he felt. I was there.
Yanri's voice was quavering on the edge of rage. It's okay, Yanri, Osmond said, gently laying a hand on Yanri's shoulder.
It is not okay.
Yanri rolled his shoulder out from under Osmond's hand.
You stole everything from him, from your own son, and let him run away in pain, writhing in the anguish of his keel, without even going after him.
Tears were streaming down Yanri's face, and Osmond realized he was no longer just talking about what he had experienced when they shared souls. Yanri continued.
You trapped him in that prison you called a home when you told him he couldn't leave. That he was too much of a disappointment, too much of a failure.
Osmond forcibly turned Yanri to face him and hugged him with all his might. It's okay, Yanri. It's okay. We survived. We moved on from them. Osmond cradled Yanri's head to his shoulder. We found each other. We found our family. Osmond pulled Anson, whose eyes were also brimming, into the hug. When they had collected themselves, the three turned together to Tavi, who had drifted a respectable distance away. What do we need to do? Osmond asked. Tavi made no further attempts at reconciliation, but got straight to the point. Did you bring the box? Osmond swung his pack off his back and retrieved the carved box. Good. Tavi continued. As you have probably surmised, time is different here. It does not march forward like in the real world, but moves however the primal forces of the arcane necessitate. So, while we are existing here together, for me it is 4 months after your father left me here, while for you, judging by your age alone, it has been over 20 years since he was here. Osmond testily replied, tired of the twisted knots woven by his father. You still haven't told us what we have to do. As I said, you have to complete the task at which I failed. The box popped open in Osmond's hands, revealing a crystal shard glowing with silver light. You have to reincarnate Riken.